Okay, so in this lesson, we're now going to move on to looking at how we can use trigonometry to find missing angles. So before we looked at missing sides, now we're looking at missing angles. Now to do this, you need to know how to use the inverse of each function. So like the opposite, so like how the opposite of plus is subtract and how the opposite of multiply is divide, we need to know the opposite of the three functions sine, cos and tan. And they're written here in your key points. Now, you would say here inverse sine, inverse cos, inverse tan. But what it looks like is sine minus 1, cos minus 1, tan minus 1. And on your calculators, you normally have to press your shift button and you can get them above these buttons here, okay? So you would press shift and then the sin button, and that gives you inverse sine, okay? So that's how you get it on your calculator. Now, you need to know how to use these, and we'll look at some worked examples so you can see why. So, looking at these examples together, we have to follow the exact same steps to begin with, so labelling the sides that you've been given. So first we need to label 7 and 10. So 7, we can see that it's opposite the angle here, so that must mean it's the opposite, and H is clearly there, the hypotenuse, the longest side. So we're dealing with O and H. So when we've got SOHCAHTOA, remember always write it down. O and H is going to be sine. So you would write sine of the angle, but this time the angle is X, equals opposite over hypotenuse. So 7 over 10. So we need to work out what X is. And this is why the inverse of sine comes in, because we need to get rid of sine. We do the opposite on the other side. So the opposite of sine is sine minus 1, or inverse sine. So you end up with X equals, and we put the inverse sign at the beginning, and then inside the bracket you put the fraction exactly as it is here. And that's that. And then you type that into your calculator, because that will give you X, and you get, to the nearest degree, 44 degrees. So it's quite straightforward. The only added bit of knowledge is inverse sine. Okay, next question, one more to practice. Now this is asking us to find angle BCA. So BCA, it's the letter that's in the middle, that's where the angle is. So we're looking for this angle here. So first things first, we need to label the sides. So 11 here would be the opposite, and 14 would be the adjacent. So we're dealing with O and A, looking at SOHCAHTOA, that means we're going to be using tan. So you write down tan of the angle, we can call that X again. So tan of the angle X equals the opposite first over the adjacent. So 11 over 14. And then once again, to get X on its own, we need to do the inverse of tan. So we get X equals inverse tan, and then the fraction as it is in the first stage of the working. You type that into the calculator, it's looking for 1 decimal place, and you get 38.2. Okay, and that's that. So just make sure that you've got those written down. The main thing to remember is only label the sides that you need, and once you've done that, make sure that you do the inverse of that function to find the angle. Okay, I'd like you to have a go at these two now, so pause the video, sketch the triangles yourself, have a go, come back and see if you've got the correct answers. Okay, so this first one here, labelling the sides first. 13 is the hypotenuse and 6 is the opposite. So SOHCAHTOA, O and H is sine. So we write down sine of the angle X equals the opposite, 6 over 13. And to get X on its own, we do inverse sine. So X equals inverse sine, fraction stays the same. Type it into a calculator, 1 decimal place, you get 27.5. And the last one, now we're looking for the size of angle QRP, so we have to label it ourselves. So QRP, remember it's the one in the middle, so that's R. So we're looking for this angle here. Okay, and then we need to label our side. So 12 is the hypotenuse, and 8, because it's next to both angles, is the adjacent. So if we've got A and H using SOHCAHTOA, that's Ka, SOHCAHTOA. So we're using cos, so cos of the angle X equals the adjacent 8 over 12. To get X on its own, we've got to do inverse cos, so cos minus 1, brackets, fraction stays the same. Type that into the calculator, and to the nearest degree, you get 48 degrees. Okay, and that's that. So make sure you've got those written down and corrected, and then move on to the worksheet and the exit card.